But first, I need to sharpen the chain. And while there are many ways to skin a cat, and the way I do it is probably not the right way, I'm going to show you how I sharpen a chainsaw chain. Uh-oh, they're looking for me. Let's get going. All right, so this is my Husqvarna 455 Rancher chainsaw. The chain that's on it is an Oregon chain. I will throw up the specs on that chain here in a minute. I don't remember them offhand, but I do remember where I ordered it from, so I'll put that up for you. But this chain has a 3/8 pitch to the teeth, which is important. You need to know what your tooth pitch is so that you can file on it with the proper size file. This particular file, along with the guide and this other flat file, all come together in a kit sold by Husqvarna specifically for sharpening their chains for this saw. You need to have a file set that is of the proper pitch for the saw that you're working on. That being said, we have this little guide here, which I have used, and it does work. I personally like to freehand it, but I don't think it makes that big of a difference whether you use the guide or not, so long as you have a good idea of what you're doing. So with that being said, I'm going to show you both with the guide as well as freehand how I go about sharpening the teeth. Okay, and I'm just going to do this here on the bed of the truck. For starters, you'll notice all the teeth are kind of dirty and greasy. That tends to happen when you're running a chainsaw. What I like to do is pick a tooth, like this one right here, and I just scratch it clean. You can use your pocket knife, you can use a fingernail, whatever. I like to clean that tooth off, and then, this isn't completely necessary, but it does help, I will mark that tooth with a Sharpie to help me keep track of where I started. That way you don't have to count teeth. I know this particular chain has 18 teeth on one side and 17 on the other, but I hate keeping track of them. So now that we have that marked, you need to have your chain free, so your brake needs to be released. We'll go ahead and we'll use our guard here. And for a tooth on this side of the chain, we'll set the guard in place on the links to where the rollers are in line with the direction of that tooth. We'll take our file, we'll get started under the edge of the tooth, bear down on the saw so that it doesn't move around, and give it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 good passes with the file. So once you have sharpened the front edge of that tooth, you can use your finger and kind of feel it. This one is very sharp now, I can tell, as opposed to the one in front of it, which is a little bit dulled down. Now I'm going to use my file to point this out to you. You have this little portion of the tooth here. This is to kind of help control the depth of the cut. Here on your guard, you'll notice you have a set of notches. This is for hard or for soft wood. And what those are for is you come in underneath and you can adjust the angle for the pitch to file off the top of that depth cut or that depth tooth so that it allows this to bite in either a little bit further for softwood or a little bit shallower for hardwood. I've tried this many times. I don't find it to be real useful. What I prefer to do is just take my flat file, and about every other time that I sharpen the teeth, I will just come through and wear down that upper portion of the guide tooth about equal to the number of strokes that I take off of this one. And what that does is, as this one wears back, you have to lower that one so that it wears down with it, because if you don't file the edge on the guide tooth, then you're not going to get a good bite with the chisel tooth. So now that I did kind of a half-assed job of explaining how this guide works, I'm going to show you how I do it typically. And that is, we've already started with this tooth, so I'm going to back the chain up. If you don't want to grab it with your fingers, you can use the file to move it back and forth. I'll move to the next tooth. I like to do all the teeth that go in one direction at one time and then come back and do the other ones. That way I don't have to keep moving the saw back and forth. So I'm going to show you how I do that now. And you'll notice as you do this, that the first pass or two are a little rough, and then by the time you get to the third or fourth pass, it starts to smooth out. See, I got a lot of resistance there because the edge of that tooth isn't smooth. But then the second one went a little easier, the third one went nice and easy, the fourth one went nice and easy, and the fifth one went nice and easy. And I always give it 5 passes. That's just kind of the number I use. I think any more than that is probably overkill in most applications. You'll also notice that the closer the tooth that you're working on is to the body of the saw, the easier it is to handle. Now on this side of the saw, because I have the body in the way, I have to work on it a little further out. When I switch to the other side, I'll be able to work on the ones that are closer, and it's a lot more efficient, at least for me being a right-handed person. And I know some of you out there are already typing away saying, hey, put the bar of the saw into a vise so that it holds it nice and rigid. It'll give you a more uniform cut, so on and so forth. Hey, listen, if you're out in the woods cutting firewood, you probably don't have a vise with you. You need to know how to do this on a log or on a truck bed like what I'm doing here. And now we're back to our painted tooth, so we'll switch and go to the other side. All right, so now that we finished the left-handed side, we'll do the right-handed side, and you'll see that I'm a little bit more efficient at it this way. Again, you can back it up closer to the body of the saw because the saw is not in the way on this side, which helps to keep it from scooting around so much. That tooth had a big notch on it. Now you might be noticing that this chain is very oily. I tend to run my oiler all the way open. For a separate video on that, I might put one out eventually, but just know there is an oil adjustment screw right here on the bottom, and I just open it all the way up. And I always top off the oil every time I top off the fuel. So the Project Farm guy did a real good job of explaining how you can dull a chainsaw in about 2 seconds by running it into the dirt. And I think that's what happened with this one last time I used it. I was cutting limbs that had fallen on the ground. And every once in a while, I find a tooth that looks like it bit a rock or something. And it's an unfortunate part of the process. In a perfect world, you could avoid it every time, but a lot of these logs we're cutting up are muddy from having hit the ground with impact, and it's just not, it's not a perfect world application, so we got to make do. And that's why it's important that you know how to sharpen these up.